Well, thank you for coming. Very happy to be here today to introduce my team of proposers, seconder, and assenters for the presidential election, and to also talk about my vision and my purpose in standing for the presidential election. I said a little bit about this a month and a half ago when I announced that I intended to step down from government. And I will now I will now elaborate on my purpose and how I intend to be a president for a new era. I'm happy to be joined by my full team of proposer, assenter, and assenters, proposer, seconder, and assenters. I had put a lot of thought into whom I wanted to be with me. They are a group of Singaporeans who have a vision for the future and a track record of leadership in their own walks of life, in public service, in the business sector, on the ground in various initiatives, in interfaith cooperation and development of harmony, in working with labor, in advancing the green cause, in advancing the arts. And I'm proud to have them with me here today, because the election and my candidacy is not just about myself, but about our future. And I've stepped into this race because I believe very strongly in the need to evolve Singapore's culture, some of our norms, and the way we go about working with each other so that we remain a shining spot in the world in the future. I've spent my entire adult life in public service. Nothing could have been more meaningful. And I believe I can now best serve Singapore, not in politics, but as president, whose role has to be above politics. And as you know, I've resigned from the PAP and I've stepped down from a senior minister and from all my positions in government. I made this decision because I believe the challenges that Singapore faces are going to grow. And the elected presidency will be critical as part of our system of confidence, system of constantly building for the future, system of holding together as a people. The challenges are not merely about today or current circumstances. There will always be ups and downs. The challenges are more fundamental. We are in a time of transition. We are in a time of transition, both in Singapore and internationally. We are moving into a new era. Internationally, we all know what's happening. There may be a pause in the relationship between the US and China, but the trajectory doesn't look good. And it's not just the US and China, but a gradually fragmenting world. And all countries are going to be tested in new ways in the years to come. Global crises are already breaking out more frequently. Economic, geopolitical, and of course environmental. They're already breaking out more frequently. That's part of the new landscape. That's part of the new era. And domestically, we are becoming a democracy with more diverse views. And as I've myself said repeatedly, I view this as inevitable and healthy. And what really matters, our real challenge, is to avoid becoming a divided society. It's one thing to have different views, it's another thing to disrespect each other and become more distant from each other and more divided. And that's what we absolutely have to avoid. It's happened in too many other societies, and it must never happen in Singapore. So we must be a democracy with more space for diverse views, civil society, but a democracy with a strong center that gives Singaporeans confidence in the future. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected as president, I pledge to bring my full experience and capabilities on the ground, nationally and internationally. My full experience and capabilities on the ground, nationally and internationally, to serve as your president for this new and more challenging era. It will involve the key roles of the presidency as we all know it. The president has to be a unifying figure. The president has to safeguard our reserves and safeguard key appointments in the public service, safeguard the integrity of key appointments. And the president has to also be able to advocate for Singapore internationally and project Singapore's voice of reason internationally. I believe I bring a combination of experience and expertise in all three dimensions that will help Singapore in the years to come. Real experience in unifying people, a deep knowledge of finance and fiscal policies, and how we safeguard reserves. That comes from my many years of experience as a finance minister, deputy prime minister, and my other roles at the MAS and GIC. And finally, my international standing. I've been flying the Singapore flag high in a variety of top-level international fora, various councils and panels, and my ability to continue to add to Singapore by projecting our voice of reason, by bridging differences of views internationally, and by creating space for Singapore in so doing, is also what I bring to the presidency. So it's that combination of all three dimensions of the presidency that I offer my experience and capabilities on. I want to say that on the first dimension of unifying people, that I speak from real experience. My advantage, quite frankly, is I have been in politics for 22 years, on the ground. And it's not just a track record of being elected. It's not about the majorities I earn in each elections. It's a track record of how I've worked with people on the ground, built a culture of empathy and respect on the ground, mutual respect between people in Taman Jurong and Jurong for over 22 years. I spent a lot of my time on it, together with my wife Jane. And we've created initiatives, real initiatives that require time, energy, effort, constant morale boosting to help people with deep disadvantage, young people with deep disadvantage, ex-inmates, single mums, anyone who needs a second chance or a third chance in life. One of them, Waiki, who's with us here today, has himself become a community leader and a friend. So that's what we've been working on the ground. And that's what has been my real politics on the ground in Jurong. So when we talk about being a unifying figure, I do not say this rhetorically or just as an aspiration, but I speak from a real track record. And it includes a track record of respecting different views, including different political leanings, and constantly trying to find common ground. So that's the first dimension, playing the role of a unifying figure. The second dimension, everyone knows my expertise. I don't want to elaborate on it. My financial expertise, my deep knowledge of fiscal policy, and how to guard the reserves. And on the third role, again, I won't elaborate at any length, but everyone knows the roles I've been performing for Singapore internationally. And in most regards, in almost all those appointments, by the way, I was chosen by my international peers to chair and lead these various panels. And Singapore must always be a place where we have people who can play those roles. Some are amongst our civil servants, some are business leaders, some are ministers, and some like myself. And as a president, I intend to play that role actively. Never become a small country that becomes irrelevant. Stay a small country that is big on the international stage. Never too big for its boots, but always respected, well regarded, a country that people want partnerships with. We have to remain that way. Never underestimate the importance of Singapore's international reputation. It is critical to our future. I bring, however, not just expertise and experience in each of these three dimensions, unifying people, fiscal policy and financial policies, advancing our space internationally. I bring not just expertise and experience. I bring a more basic orientation in my life, integrity and independence of mind that I've held on to throughout my life. I'm known for it, both within government and outside government. I've always believed in playing in a team, but it's a team with views of our own. And that's the strength of the system, that we've been able to have debates within government, within cabinet, with differing views. Eventually, within cabinet, you have to come to a collective decision and abide by it. But the debates that take place before we come to a collective decision are very serious debates. And I played a very active role with my own perspective of issues, particularly on social and economic issues, that is part of my makeup. Now that I'm out of government, if I'm fortunate to be elected as president, of course I'm no longer bound by collective decisions, but I'm the same person. I don't have to change my colors like a chameleon. I'm the same person with the same integrity and the same independence of mind. And that remains critical for the role of the president, because when it comes to, especially when it comes to the president's powers on the spending of past reserves, on every aspect of fiscal policy that impinges on our reserves, and when it comes to making key appointments in the system, in the public service, that integrity and independence of mind is critical. So, in short, what I bring is both the expertise and experience, as well as that integrity and independence of mind that I believe is going to be extremely important in the presidency in the years to come. Finally, let me say, I'm a deep optimist in Singapore's future. I'm a deep optimist. Even as we enter a more challenging and uncertain era, even if we get crises thrown our way, both expected and totally unexpected, I'm a deep optimist. We will go through ups and downs in Singapore, but we remain a unique place where we can always work together to make the future better for all Singaporeans. That has to be Singapore. And I'm convinced we can do it, dealing with difficulties forthrightly, building and rebuilding trust in the Singapore system and amongst our people, and most fundamentally, having deeper respect for each other, regardless of social background, race or religion, or differing views, having deeper respect for each other. That underpins social mobility, social justice, and an inclusive society, having deeper respect for each other. And I intend to promote that if I'm fortunate enough to be elected as president. So I'm convinced in Singapore's future and in the Singapore system. And in a more challenging era, I do feel I can play an important role to preserve that future for Singapore.
I'm honored to be part of the team. 各位媒体朋友，我现在想用中文来讲。大家下午好，我是蔡其生啊。这个首先目前我们台面上的3位有意参选的总统候选人，他们在各自的领域都十分优秀，他们愿意站出来接受选举的考验，值得赞扬。我认识单达曼先生很多年，他在2015年担任新加坡副总理兼财政部长，在国会发表财政预算案演说的时候，我是当时的国会官员议员。此外，他领导新加坡技能创新与生产力委员会的时候，我也是委员会的成员之一。当时我是以中华总商会会长的身份参与工作，所以我们彼此认识。我对他比较熟悉。令我最深刻的印象呢，是单达曼先生，视野开阔，这个眼光，这个很敏锐，看问题很透彻。虽说这个身段柔软，但是他的说服力很强，这个是我的观察。那更重要的是，他善于沟通，能把复杂的问题说得清清楚楚。那我也觉得他有团结不同族群的能力，因此我全力支持单达曼先生竞选总统。当前的世界局势变幻莫测，刚才单达曼先生也跟我们分享了。那新加坡的未来充满挑战，我呼吁新加坡人应该或者说能够以更务实、更理性的，在务实更理性的基础下，来选出一位有能力、有品德，而且精力充沛的总统。那么为 团结族群，为保卫我们的储备金，以及为了监督新加坡公共服务系统的诚信，让我们来支持单达曼先生成功当选，为更好的明天，我们共同努力。谢谢大家。
When I learned that Mr. Tharman offers himself as the to be in the elections for the president of Singapore, I was elated, and he asked me to second his candidacy, and without hesitation, I agreed to do so. Now, I think what Singaporeans want, and this is my firm belief, is that they want a people's president, the people's president, somebody whom they can identify with, somebody whom they can connect with easily. And I like to use the Malay word, a Malay phrase, berjiwa rakyat. I thought that maybe I can't find a good English phrase for that. Berjiwa rakyat is basically not just having good relations with people, but a connection that goes right to the soul. And that is berjiwa rakyat. And I've known Mr. Tharman from far and from near, and he is a leader who is berjiwa rakyat. Which means that from that then flows a leader, a president who will be mesra rakyat. That means intimate, close, with the people. And from where I come from, in the Malay community, Mr. Tharman has visited our institutions, community institutions, and I see and I get a very good feedback from the Malay ground that he is not only well liked, but he is loved by the people. More so, Mr. Tharman, the Malay word which I use is peka budaya, culturally sensitive. And he recognizes the cultural other, or the culture of other people. And beyond that, also another Malay phrase, bersilang budaya. That means intercultural. When he visits our institutions, he is very keen to learn about the culture of the community. Yeah. So I thought it's such a man who is well liked by people, by the community, and certainly he has the knack of winning hearts and soul. I remember that when he went to Geylang Serai, you sang the P. Ramlee song, Getaran Jiwa. And not many Malays can sing that song. It's a classic P. Ramlee song. So I think this shows his closeness to cultures of other people and his love for people. I have also the experience, the opportunity for a personal engagement with Mr. Tharman. The most recent was about 2 months ago, and we spoke of a whole range of issues from identity to race to religion to multiculturalism, meritocracy, nationalism. And I found this man, Mr. Tharman, exhibited a lot of independence in terms of thinking. I see him as a thought leader, a thinker, a public intellectual. And mind you, the hallmark of a thought leader, a public intellectual, and a thinker is independence. You cannot be a thought leader if you are not independent. You cannot be a thinker if you are not independent. And more so for Mr. Tharman, who has achieved so much in his life, in his public service, national stage, international stage, achieving so much, and no one can achieve that much if that person is basically a yes man and not an independent leader person. So I think this is who Mr. Tharman is, and all of us here know him, recognize him, and I always have personal takeaways when I meet and hear Mr. Tharman's lectures, speeches, and so on. And I use some of these lessons that I learned, in my role as ambassador, how countries should start up their economy. And I thought Mr. Tharman, as the economic wizard and the maestro, his thoughts and his ideas about starting up economy, I find it very useful, and I shared this with people whom I meet in my work in the diplomacy area. Now, I think all in all, I believe that Mr. Tharman can be the people's president who Singaporeans can identify with, be connected to, are proud of, and have trust and confidence that Mr. Tharman can discharge the executive roles of the president with distinction and fly Singapore's flag high in the international community. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've known Tharman for 25 years, first in the Ministry of Education and then Ministry of Finance, and finally in the time in GIC. He obviously has a mind which is very sharp, very agile, very quickly grasping complex situations. He listens and thinks very carefully. He speaks with confidence, with conviction, and very articulate in expressing his views. I remember once when I was at St. Garden Symposium in 2015, when Mr. Tharman was being interviewed by somebody who was on the BBC, who asked whether he believed in the notion of the safety net for people who fall between the cracks in the economy. Mr. Tharman's response was that he believed in the notion of the trampoline. And I can see that the BBC interviewer was really puzzled and actually needed quite some time to understand what Mr. Tharman was talking about. Obviously, when I was in GIC, I sat in all the GIC board meetings, and the Prime Minister, as chairman of GIC, time and again would make sure that Mr. Tharman had the opportunity to express his views. And Prime Minister was there always listening very carefully to his suggestions and his proposals. I could also say that, quite obviously in the field of economics and finance, even for me and for my colleagues in GIC, we always benefited so much from not just his understanding of the issues, but his ability to express the ideas so clearly that nobody can miss the point of his analysis and our appreciation of the situation. To speak quite frankly, when he first entered into politics, I had my doubts about whether he'll be able to successfully make it because, there are so many people who have such superior intellect that find enormous difficulty connecting with ordinary people. But, of course, seeing how things have happened with the grassroots, I have absolutely no doubt at all about the honesty, the humanness with which he treats people, his capacity to reach out to people at all levels, to see what their needs are, and to organize things, organize activities, organize institutions even to be able to attend to their needs. I think the job of the President of Singapore is to help the government of the day fulfill their commitment to secure the well-being of Singapore and Singaporeans. And I think we need to see the candidacy of Mr. Tharman within that context of his capacity to be able to work with the government and help the government. I think too many people tend to look at the job of the president as how to sort of almost block the government, how to make sure the government doesn't get away with these various proposals. Look with which I would say, and look with suspicion at proposals that come up. Whereas I think my perception, I think the job of the president is really to help that process. It's an institution separate from the political leadership of the government, but nonetheless an integral part of creating a great future for Singapore as we attend to the well-being of Singaporeans. And I believe Mr. Tharman stands in a good position to do that because of his knowledge and experience, because of his network of contacts, because of his international standing, because of a very clear recognition of his capabilities, of his capacities, of his areas of particular interest. I consider that in his last appointment, where he was made a coordinating minister for economic and social policy, was a recognition of his particular areas of strength. I think the president helping to secure good governance for Singapore is not just about being prepared to oppose proposals from the government, but very much also about backing good ideas and good proposals that come up. I, honestly speaking, when I was asked if I would consider being one of his attestors, the most critical question that flowed through my mind was if Tharman as president, if he were given a proposal which is virtually the same as the kind of proposal he had put up or had endorsed as a member of the government, whether when he sees such a proposal, he would be prepared to turn it down because he sees the circumstances as different, rather than simply feel he has to agree with it. In other words, the question in my mind was whether Mr. Tharman was prepared to disagree with the Mr. Tharman of the past. And my conclusion was he had a steadfastness of character, he has that clarity of thought, a willingness to re-examine proposals and re-examine situations. I think these are all elements which made me convinced that here is a man who will always want to do what is good and what is right for Singapore, and to be able, indeed, to be able to work with the government to help the process of making sure that poor proposals do not get through, and at the same time, making sure that he will do everything that he can in his own capacity to help good proposals be achieved the best way possible. So the way I look at it is that Singapore is, I think, not simply in a time of important transition as Mr. Tharman had laid out in his opening statements, but I think having a president that understands the complexity of government, and having a president whose heart is fundamentally about making the best for Singapore and Singaporeans at a time when we are all anticipating having a new Prime Minister in the foreseeable future, makes this a doubly important election for the presidency, and a particular occasion where I would put it that for us all Singaporeans, that we have to assess the candidates that are before us and think very carefully what we need for Singapore, what we need for our futures, and what we can see in this particular case of Mr. Tharman, who will represent not just the current concerns and the upcoming concerns of Singaporeans who go to vote, but even as a president, to look out for the people who do not have the vote, the young of Singapore who have not reached the age of vote, and indeed even Singaporeans who have not yet been born, to say that as he makes his decisions, it has to be for all Singaporeans now and the future. And I have just very strong personal convictions that Mr. Tharman will meet all that demands, all that expectations of a president who do really good for Singapore. Thank you.
Like everyone else on this table, I was very happy to learn that Tharman decided to run for presidency. And like others, I think we'd like to support in any way that we can. There are two specific things I'd like to address here. One is the international stature that we need in the presidency, and as you alluded, at this perilous time. And the second one is the moral clarity, the sense of purpose, and indeed the independence of mind that I think is absolutely necessary for the presidency. Like Seung Guan, I've worked with Tharman since 25 years ago when you were just Deputy Secretary for Education and joined the founding committee for Singapore Management University. Over 25 years, we've had a lot of chance to interact. And I think, as you alluded yourself, you are a team player. A lot of things are discussed where there are collective decisions made. As a CEO in an organization, I also expect that when a decision is made, everyone comes together. But in private conversations, I've had so many opportunities to realize that Tharman has a consistent worldview, has moral integrity, and an intellectual compass that ties everything together. And that, to me, is absolutely important together with independence of mind. And it may not be apparent to most people because in many ways you are such an establishment figure. But to me, it is particularly important to be able to navigate in a complex world where you have an independence of mind, but at the same time, you can function within the nuances of having to be a top leader. Personally, I think independence by itself is overrated. Because if you look at it, independence by itself simply means nobody can tell me what to do. I do what I want to do. But if you don't have that moral integrity, that sense of purpose, that consistent worldview, and proven capability to get things done while maintaining your own independence of mind, then sheer independence by itself doesn't mean, to me, very much. And as a person who values independence of mind, I think I've seen in Tharman the ability to really navigate without any of his principles being compromised and yet being able to get things done. I think that is absolutely necessary in a leader as opposed to someone who just beats his chest and say, I'm independent. So that to me is extremely important. As a business person, I travel almost every week all over the world. And for those of you who do travel, you'll realize how small and potentially irrelevant we are. And at this particular time, I think it's so important to have a president who will not be partisan in politics, but can speak to the world on issues that are vital, not just to Singapore, but to the whole world. Issues of global income inequality, climate change, a collapsing financial system, geopolitical tensions. We need a president who can stand above the rest of the crowd in terms of global leaders and make us proud that a small nation can actually be internationally respected. So for these two reasons and many others, I really do think Tharman will make an excellent president.
When I first heard that Mr. Tharman is standing for the presidential election, I was rejoicing because I thought that you would call for such a time as this. And it is so timely. And why do I say that? You know, we are all living in a world that is so uncertain and so challenging. And we need to recognize that Singapore is not spared as well. And all of us need to come together and to recognize that we need a president that has got a tremendous heart, a compassionate heart, as well for the people, and are able to help us to channel through, to this very, very challenging and difficult time, and bringing the people together, unifying them together. And as a unionist, like my fellow brothers and sisters in the labor movement, I'm so thankful that Tharman, or sometimes we call him Brother Tharman, in the labor movement, that he's a friend of the labor movement. And he reaches out to our workers, to the people on the ground. And I was just having a conversation with a union leader just 2 days ago. And she shared with me that her parents told her, this is so difficult to understand, the policy. But the moment Mr. Tharman spoke and explained, and it makes it so clear and so simple. And I don't know how he did it, but that is truly a gifting. And we need someone like this as well, a unifying factor and someone that the workers on the ground can trust. Mr. Tharman has been building the relation with the labor movement, especially in the area of the Ong Ting Cheong Labor Leadership Institute. And that is an institute whereby he encouraged leaders to be trained. He encourages us to upskill, and I'm a beneficiary of it as well. And many of our unionists and our leaders, so that we can bring our workers along the way as well. And the most important thing about Mr. Tharman is that he actually is an inspiring leader that brings the Singapore economy, that builds the Singapore economy, but at the same time, he has a heart for the people. He wants to make sure that the people benefited from it. And I think that is so very, very important. And I have also seen the number of policies he worked very closely, that he has been championing, and whether be it the job credit scheme that really helps our workers to save jobs, to have a livelihood, to be able to support the family. And there are other schemes that, such as supporting strongly on our progressive wage model as well, that helps our lower wage workers to live day by day, to have a better life. And personally, I've also a very enriching experience and very humble, Mr. Tharman. I remember that in 2012, when I was just a newly nominated Member of Parliament, and that day was very nerve-wracking for me on the 28th of February, when I made my maiden speech. And I shared passionately in my heart about my concern for our workers, whether would they have sufficient CPF savings when they retired? Would they be able to retire with that gracefully, with that dignity? And I remember, and I didn't expect that, Mr. Tharman, you came to me. You came to me and you tried to understand where I'm coming from, and you perfectly understood. And you gave me the assurance that you will personally look into it and you will do something about it to touch and impact the lives of our workers. And you did it. And you did it, and you kept to your words. And there were so many occasions that we have, that you interact with the workers, with the people on the ground. And truly, we recognize that you are the man of the hour. And truly, we fully support the presidency election. So thank you, Mr. Tharman.
I always feel very blessed when I speak to Mr. Tharman, because he's always on the ground, trying to understand what we do, our struggles as artists. And the most important thing is Mr. Tharman listens. He really listens to us. And I wanted to cite one of the speech that he used. He said, 风雨同舟. And I think this 风雨同舟, it means, roughing out in difficult time together. And in this new era that we are going into, it's very important to have a unifying figure, to unify Singaporeans. In my talk with many youths, the young people want a president that they can be very, very proud of, to represent Singapore globally, internationally, globally. And then on the domestic ground, Mr. Tharman has always been, his pulse has always been on the ground. Like what I said just now, he listens to the sentiments of issues that's been happening. And this unifies people. And for somebody in the arts community, Mr. Tharman and Mrs. Tharman has always been a strong advocate and supporter for the arts. Yeah. They believe that the arts can deepen cultural identity, foster cultural understanding, and through the medium, it promotes multiculturalism. That is something that is so precious in Singapore. As you know, that I'm actually doing NDP now, and every time when I look at the rehearsal, whatever that has been happening, it just didn't come easy. It is too many years of sticking by this vision, and I think Mr. Tharman's vision is very much aligned to keep Singapore going and strong. We are a country with very little resources. Humans, people are all what we have, and I believe that he has the belief to unify every one of us together. So yeah, in short, being an arts community, we are very hopeful for the future should Mr. Tharman be elected as the president. Thank you.
When I first volunteered in Tamajong in my first day, I was wearing long sleeve shirt because of my tattoo. I fear that I will scare people off. Yeah. And then Mr. Tharman and Mrs. Tharman came to our table and told me one thing: just be yourself. So the next following Monday, I'll just wear a t-shirt and sit there, interview the resident. That kind of, And actually, it bring a deeper understanding with the resident. And so, after volunteer for a month, then Mr. Tharman again asked me, why do I want to volunteer in Tamajurong? I told him that I'm sick of going to prison so many times. I'm sick of discrimination. I can't find a proper job. I don't have proper education. And I grew up from a single parents family. Then he told me to prove myself. Then I said, how? He said, go to school lor. And then they sent me to the cell. Without knowing I'm a Hokkien speaker and I can't even write proper English. And I can't even do a 15-minute presentation in school. Yeah, so they slowly teach me. In email, they help me to correct my grammar. And then they involve a lot of grassroots to mentor me on how to eat proper Western food, like from outside to inside, eat the soup first, drink the soup first, and then use the thing to cut the thing. Okay, then, so I actually found they give me a way out of prison, a way out of poverty, and a way out of being low educated. So I asked my friend to come. I said, hey, here got a lot of good people down here. Come along. Then a few of people, my friend, they are released from prison, came and joined us, and together we formed Beacon of Life. And then today, we all graduate from university. I have degree in fine arts from LaSalle, and I'm a full-time artist now. We have member who graduate from NUS Law, who is a lawyer now. We have member who graduate from SIM social work degree. We have 2 members graduate from NTU SIM math degree. And we are all giving back to society. And we are volunteering in a lot of organizations, giving a lot of talks and help a lot of other people. All because he doesn't look down on us. He listens. I think as a porter, I'm a porter, I do pottery. I'm not trying to sell Gonggo's marketing. I think a good porter can turn any clay into a piece of art he wants. But a great porter study and listen to the clay. Different kind of clay. Understand their characteristic. And slowly turn them into resonate with the local context in terms of culture and arts of Singapore in an identity. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Tharman.
I've known Mr. Tharman since 2005 when he was the Minister for Education. He launched the exhibition on tsunami, Asian tsunami, at the atrium just outside Plaza Singapura. And ever since then, he never turned us down when it comes to community work, social work, humanitarian. So when I was asked to be one of his centers, I can't turn him down. Payback time, not so much of payback time, but every time we invited Mr. Tharman to our events, and he would be readily accept. And even if he can't make it when he's not available, he doesn't have to do, but he actually offers other senior POH, public office holders, to actually grace such causes, the humanitarian and the community causes. So for that, and every time he comes to our events, he'll add gloss, and I am talking about figuratively. He'll add gloss to by mixing and really being connected to our volunteers, to our guests, and that shows respect, to everyone that he meets, and he's a diplomat, a real diplomat, a dignitary, diplomat in the sense not by profession, but diplomat as a person. And he commands respect because he gives respect. And I think it's very important for the civic society. We understand that the social cohesion and resilience that we are working on, I think superficially it looks good, but I think there's a lot that needs to be done. The undercurrents is very strong, as what Mr. Tharman had said earlier. Across the world, there's a respect deficit that we are talking about, and we need someone who's savvy, socially savvy, someone who's smooth, someone who's strong, to actually be that influential voice of reason, to bring the society and Singaporeans to bind and bond us better together. So I think respect is, I think it's something which we really need to work on, and it's also because of the social media era where everyone hides behind the keyboard, and so there is quite a substantial lack of it as people deal with one another.
My interactions with Mr. Tharman is very much on the ground with Tasik Jurong. So when we see Mr. Tharman on international platforms, so when he's back home, Mr. Tharman and Mrs. Tharman will always be on the ground at hawker centers, interacting with hawkers, with ordinary Singaporeans. Or I won't say interacting actually, I would say just catching up with old friends. Yeah, that he knows these families by generations. He knows them by name. And it's incredible, the kind of conversations that they have, the kind of intimacy, the kind of knowledge that he has of all these individual lives. And I think that would only be possible because there really is a very sincere interest in getting to know all these individuals at a very personal level. And ensuring that they are all taken care of. Yeah, that kind of sincerity is only possible. That kind of relationship is only possible with the deep sincerity that he has for the people on the ground. Yeah. During community engagements, I think the signature for Mr. Tharman is that he will not come in and just deliver speeches. He just loves to come in, participate, listen into the conversations, take part on and understand the ideas of the different generations and all. So only after he does all that, then he will come in and share his thoughts. And it's actually he's trying to advocate of all the different views that he has heard from the discussions actually. So this is very much in line with what he talks about, respecting different opinions, respecting different views, and trying to advocate for all these different views. Yeah. And lastly, I would share about during community engagements, community partnerships, those areas, those community partners who are under his leadership, you can see that we all work hand in hand. It's really a joy to see that. I remember we were at a focus group discussion and we had team members from different areas and we were sharing about how would you depict a picture of community partnership in Jurong. And the picture that came out was everybody holding each other's hands. That's the picture that we all drew. Yeah, so I thought it's really a reflection of the leadership that he has cultivated in the team. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much, Mr. Tharman. Orvar ko orvar maryadai. That's in Tamil, right? It's very different. It's put together. Here in English it says respect for all, but in Tamil it also says mutual respect. It's very different. Brings it to a different dimension. And I want to bring it to a dimension where we just spoke a lot about people, society, and everything human. I would like to bring it to a different dimension of environment, nature, biodiversity, and everything else which regards what's happening around the world with climate change. And I'm very happy to know Mr. Tharman because he's a very, very ardent supporter of what actually is going on in terms of changes that needs to be made to the environment. He sits on the Global Water Commission, and the important advocacy that he has about water that needs to be protected and useful for everyone in a form that is equitable and readily available to everyone in the world, from the poorest country to the richest country, speaks about the reason why he's doing what he's doing. I mean, because he's a very clear advocate that inequality of every resource that we have has to be looked at very intently. So it's not about Singapore alone. I think Singaporeans are very, very lucky to have what we have. But in the international world, there's so much inequality. And with someone from Singapore having to be being able to be on the international stage to speak about it, to say and speak about inequalities, not only about societal inequalities, but also environmental and many of the other aspects that everyone else in the international community is facing, is a big bonus for Singapore. And he's made it very clear in some of the roles that he has in international circles that he has in the international arena, he will still carry on. And no other president has done that for Singapore, to bring that spotlight, to show that they are advocates for some important causes that they actually feel strongly about. And I commend Mr. Tharman for doing this. I hope that we will all support him for what he's doing. Thank you very much.